Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora Cecere.
Today's supply chain processes are inside out, and they're insular. And as we've gone from regional to multinational to global supply chains, we've increased process latency. Process latency is the time it takes an organization to make a decision. The other thing that we are struggling with is what makes a good decision, because we don't measure it, we don't define it. So as we think about what happens in the market, whether it's shipping data, point of sale data, rating and review data, image data, the supply chain is surrounded by data that is not used. In fact, 80% of the data is not used. And the reason is that we have technologies that are very much based on relational databases where we want to write transactional data into what I call data gels, which are relational databases. And our current systems are based upon schema on write, meaning that we have to define the schema, the semantics, when we write to the architecture versus schema on read. And that limits our ability to be flexible with the data sources. So 80% of the data is not used. Most of the data is locked into this data jail kind of architecture. So a year and a half ago, I called all of the major supply chain planning technology vendors and I said, there's a need to redefine the taxonomies of supply chain. They're too supply-centric. Demand is a time-phased data source to be consumed based on history, and history is no longer a predictor of demand. And there's a hole in the architecture for procurement. We don't have a good way to translate planned orders based upon constraints into procurement and to bidirectionally make the trade-offs between source, make, and deliver based upon the issues in the network. And over the 4 phases of the pandemic, we saw increasing issues in both the supply base and the transportation carrier base. And there was no way to do this bidirectional orchestration. So we started a group to redefine processes outside in. And what I want to do is share with you my insights. My first insight is that to build outside-in processes, we must first unlearn, to relearn, to rethink that our current processes are very supply-centric, and they're very much based upon existing taxonomies that were defined in the 1980s when we were still debating how to do optimization as we move from 32-bit to 64-bit architectures, much less what can happen through cloud and more advanced deep learning technologies. So what we have defined today in planning at a taxonomy level, which a taxonomy is really the alignment of the optimizers within layers to be able to improve decision support, and the consumption layer basically will consume the signal from the tactical or the MPS layer, manufacturing, production, scheduling layer, down into the operational and executional layers. So the current taxonomy was based upon the technology limitations of the 1980s, which are no longer an issue. Or, the current issues are very different than the past issues. So what if we could build outside-in processes? What if we could sense and respond to market signals, and we could translate, and we could do bidirectional orchestration? So the first issue is we have to unlearn to be able to do that. We have to throw away our current definition of taxonomies and start again. This is really hard because people are defined by their knowledge, and they hold on to it like Linus holds on to his blanket. The second thing is we have to be able to accept the fact that data is never perfect and that data speaks to us. The patterns of the data speak to us. And if we can harness and harvest the patterns in the data, we can do preemptive sensing that can inform the supply chain. But in that process, it's never perfect. But machine learning allows us to allow imperfect data to be used. Then the third thing we have to learn is that functional supply chain processes that have been generated by many of the consortia, ACSM, CSCMP, are based upon functional definitions, and this is threatening, right? So as we think about outside in and we think about changing demand from a simple time phase view of history to being able to look at market drivers and demand as a flow, that is a very different construct of demand. And then the consumption of that demand signal into bidirectional orchestration, where we're looking at source, make, and deliver together, requires design, which only 9% of companies today design their supply chain, and the ability to make trade-offs across organizations that don't collaborate. And that optimization needs to be an intense what-if optimization based upon the orchestration levers. So in the 2 years where we've been able to do testing, my observation is that it's easier for business leaders of younger generation to roll up their sleeve and to test than it is for technologists that are very wedded to the technology because isn't that what they sell and isn't that what they know? But the promise is very, very large. The promise is all about time. It's about cutting the cycle time on time to know by 30 to 40 to 50%. It is about better output. So forecast value add improves by 14 to 20%. And it's about the ability for organizations to work together across what-if analysis for source, make, and deliver in different ways to understand the feasibility of the plan and to really help the organization drive alignment. So there is no place today to go build and buy outside-in processes. But you can start by identifying all the market signals that you would like to use and by defining what that flow of demand would look like. And you can go to the projectzebra.org website and you can see the work we've done on demand flows. And then you can look at the work we've done on bidirectional orchestration and think about your own levers and think about how you can use them. And give me a call because I'm convinced that outside-in planning is the path for the future.